pandemic in 2004, reporting also, though, that their corporate crime units had been downsized to join the fight against terrorism. Some criminal cases are reported in the press, but not all are prosecuted, with companies often paying fines rather than facing a judge or a jury. Goldman Sachs paid $60 million to settle a subprime complaint. The Massachusetts authorities said they had designed mortgages to fail, and they paid $60 million, but they did not admit any guilt.
That's standard. It's standard when Wall Street firms negotiate what are in effect plea bargains with regulators, for them not to admit guilt.
According to an investigation by the Center for Public Integrity, 25 of the sleaziest subprime lenders were backed by the biggest banks in the United States: Citigroup, Wells Fargo, J.P. Morgan Chase, and Bank of America. Together, the Financial Times reported they originated $100 billion in subprime mortgages between 2005 and 2007, almost three-quarters of the total.
What I did in the mortgage industry, I first got involved in about 1998. I was a loan originator. And during that time, what I had seen was nothing short of amazing in terms of, it was very predatory. The techniques that were being used, the salesmanship that was being used, the gimmicks on the loans and how they were structured, it really disturbed me. Catch-all to this and how they could get away with that is people hear full disclosure. Depending on the lending institution you went to, in other words, a bank, a broker, or a lending institution, all three are different. All three have different sets of regulations that govern them. And so full disclosure wasn't necessarily important to the loan itself. Just get them to sign on the dotted line. If they were happy with the numbers, you have a loan.
My name is Mo Bedard. I'm with LoanSafe. Basically what we do is when someone's having mortgage issues and several other issues, but what I want to do is show the signature of Edna. What we're finding out is 80% of the people don't even know they have violations on their loans. This is the signature on her HUD 1, basically, which is right here. And then have this signature here, which is her actual signature, which shows a completely different signature. It doesn't take, to me, an expert to figure out that there's something terribly wrong here. Someone gets a set of loan docs, and they're usually probably 2 to 3 inches thick. There might be 15 or 20 really pertinent disclosures that borrowers need to worry about, okay? And they're buried in there, and they don't know what they're signing. Usually, they'll send out a notary to sign the loan with them at loan signing, and the notary usually has no clue of what is in that loan. And it's all part of the scheme, we like to call it. And then we go up here, we start looking at whiteout, and then we have a consultant fee. When you see a consultant fee on a mortgage, that should set off red flags. There's not really any consultants on a mortgage or a sale. It should have been one fee to Rise Mortgage. This Mark Murphy is apparently someone we need to investigate and find out exactly who he is and why he got $7,800 on this loan. These people basically fraudulently took this woman's home that she's been living in for over 15 years and thinking that it's hers, where it was actually never was hers since 1993.
The fraud and deception that was built into these transactions was a necessary part of the transaction in order to generate the profits.
Wall Street doesn't do mortgage lending. What Wall Street did was package, sell, repackage, and resell mortgages, making what was a small housing bubble a gigantic housing bubble, and making what became an American financial problem very much a global financial problem.
Welcome to Wall Street Today. Economist Max Wolf, who works in the financial industry, is our tour guide.
You're looking at people who've gone through 10 unthinkable low-probability events in a 4-month period, when every time you think you can catch a breather, there's another leg down. Atmospheres on trading floors and in a lot of these firms are funereal. Friends are gone, bonuses are gone, futures are unsure. It's been very difficult.
As we spoke on Wall Street, people wanted to get into the conversation. Most were worried.
I was a bank examiner for 10 years, okay? And I wonder where the regulators are to let Citicorp. I know they got an office in Citicorp's building year-round. You know, where was the SEC? Where are all the guys that are supposed to be watching, you know, what's going on. And, I mean, when I was a bank examiner 20 years ago, you know, we had some crises in the late 80s, early 90s, you know, but we got our arms around it. Nobody got their arms around this. I just wonder if you think the average person in America really grasps the magnitude of the crisis that we're in.
I hope they do, and I think it's an excellent question. My personal guess is no. My personal guess is they'd be much more angry and much more interested if they understand how much is at play here.
The destruction here is around the clock. You shred papers, you shred deals. All the money's been made at this point. All the takeout happened a couple years ago. Now you're just sort of looking at the remains of a very profitable time, which will be followed by another very profitable time because the same people will still be involved in structuring the same types of things. The biggest crime in all of this is the thing that's the least able to be understood and examined by the FBI, by the Department of Justice, by anyone in Washington. The tiny, tiny lowest layer of the crisis that started with subprime defaulting at the homeowner-borrower level. The money wasn't made there. The money was made because several layers up a pyramid, Wall Street investment firms and commercial bank investment groups decided to repackage those mortgages, create layers of them that they then resold to investors.
Here's what happens. There are 3 defaults on mortgages. The bank that holds those sells those at 10 cents on the dollar to a second bank. That bank puts those together with 3 other defaults and 3 other defaults and makes a second package and sells it to a third bank. The third bank sells 6 of these things packages and bundles them and sells them to some investor who has no idea what he has.
They borrowed against those layers, which is the real crime. They would take a little piece of a layer of a security underneath which somewhere there was a bunch of home buyers, and they would take it and they would borrow 30 times the amount of money that it represented.
5 big investment banks dominated Wall Street. It is they who took the subprime loans purchased from banks and packaged them as bundled investments to be sold worldwide. There were reports that there was what was called suction from Wall Street. In other words, Wall Street investment houses, as they began to make billions on these securitized loans and CDOs and derivatives, were pressuring the mortgage people at the local level, give us more, give us more, give us more.
Well, the reason why Wall Street was putting the pressure or the sucking sound that you referred to on the loan originators is because the profits that they were generating, when this whole concept first opened up and people realized the money that was to be made on the back end, trading the paper, they were essentially creating liquid cash from nothing.
We're talking $26. There's $14 trillion worth of asset backs with subprime and other types of mortgages and CDOs created between 2003 and 2007. $14 trillion were created. On that, investment houses and hedge funds and private equity funds could leverage 30, 40 times. Banks could leverage 15 to 20 times. On average, they could only leverage 13 times, but on certain securities...
But that's more than the value of the whole country, of the whole gross domestic product.
If you, on average, and this is a very conservative estimate, assume that the average leverage for the $14 trillion worth of asset backs and CDOs was 10 times, which to me is a conservative estimate. That's $140 trillion worth of nothing. If you lose the $14 trillion, the other 140 minus the $14 trillion doesn't exist. You have nothing, you have no collateral left to pay to the people that you borrowed money from, and it all falls down.
The practice to sell mortgages to people who clearly can't afford it, so to target these people in order to give them mortgages, and then to use these mortgages to sell it back to the banks in order to create mortgage-backed security is a criminal practice, for sure.
And I think the bank that does that does have liability, civil and considerably in some cases criminal, but that liability arises when they sell that portfolio of mortgages to investors who believe they are getting safe, sound, secure mortgages. And there are very injured victims at that chain, that end of the distribution chain, because I can direct you to school boards around the country that have lost almost their entire funds and have lost their pension funds.
You sound angry. I am angry. I'm an investor. Okay? I invested in some of these investment companies, and now I have to wait, holding my breath, hoping that I won't take such a large hit.
We can all be wiped out here.
Yes, we all can be. Okay, and left with nothing, and these guys are rewarded.
And I would even say that this is racketeering because it took place between a group of real estate agencies and banks together.
A lot of people made a lot of money, but when these homeowners defaulted in record numbers, the whole system became infected. Who had brought down Wall Street? Hedge funds. Back in 2007, with the boom still in full swing, my business partner Rory O'Connor attended this party just off Wall Street for traders under the age of 30. It reeked of affluence, shiny cars, and beautiful people. Hedge funds were like millionaire-only clubs where ungodly sums could be invested in complicated vehicles in secret, outside the prying eyes of Wall Street regulators. Soon, all the traditional investment firms had their own hedge funds. No wonder so many of these young people wanted in, and at the top.
I mean, I personally spent 5 years in private equity and then made the decision, instead of going back to business school, to move over to the public side. So that was a conscious decision on my part. And I think most people probably get involved because there is an opportunity to move up the ranks and make more money at an earlier age in hedge funds than there is in private equity, which is the natural progression after a couple years in an investment banking program.
Well, if you were going to be in the investment world, the best way to, and you're a good investor, the best way to make money is to have a hedge fund, because you get compensated much higher. Hedge funds were being paid 1% of the assets and 20% of the profits in those days. So obviously that was the best way to make money if you were any good at it.
Insurance company AIG was a leading seller of credit derivatives.
So a bank, for example, like Goldman Sachs, would create a CDO. It would stick all kinds of subprime loans and packages of them into a package, and then it would go off to AIG, and AIG had a AAA rating, a pristine credit rating, and Goldman would say, you know what, you take this package of junk we've just created and kind of insure it. You basically write a default swap to us. You basically credit insure it. You've got a much better rating than we do, so our investors will buy it from you with that insurance. You make money, we make money, everybody's happy.
Former bank regulator William Black told Bill Moyers this was all deliberate.
This stuff, the exotic stuff that you're talking about, was created out of things like liar's loans that were known to be extraordinarily bad. And now it was getting AAA ratings. Now, a AAA rating is supposed to mean there is zero credit risk. So you take something that not only has significant, it has crushing risk. That's why it's toxic. And you create this fiction that it has zero risk. That itself, of course, is a fraudulent exercise.
Should I, after tea and cakes and ices, have the strength to force the moment to its crisis?
AIG made guarantees totaling more than their ability to pay, an amount larger than the entire value of the company. Actually, that's a bit of an understatement. AIG, along with others who sold derivatives, had insured their policyholders to the tune of an estimated $596 trillion. Compare this to the gross national product of the entire world, and the problem should become more obvious.
So you were just gambling billions, possibly trillions of dollars. Well, I wouldn't refer to it as gambling. I would, these transactions were individually underwritten very carefully, and maybe I can provide some more background to you that may be helpful.
If they were carefully underwritten, how come no one wants to buy them?
How could AIG have possibly expected to make good on its promises? One thing we know for